Hi again, and welcome to another edition of the Casual Conversation. I'm Joe Salzone, and as is our yearly tradition, we're coming to you from the Cayuga County Sheriff's Office, and we're joined by the Honorable Sheriff of Cayuga County, Brian Schenck. Sheriff, thanks a lot for having us back here again.
Thank you, Joe. It's always a pleasure to meet up with you and have a conversation and catch up.
Always a pleasure. Let's start first with just in general here, second quarter of 2024. How are things in the department?
Things are busy. We're always busy. We never run out of things to do, but we've been very busy in all divisions within our sheriff's office, jail, our road patrol division, and even our civil division this year has been extremely busy, but really got a lot of work to do this year. Always busy.
Is there one division that's busier than another, or is it steady across the board?
No, it's really steady across the board. We just have a lot of work in all the different areas of the work that we do, and our sheriff's office touches so many different areas. It's not just a road patrol division. We oversee the jail and a civil division and a security division, and each and every one of those divisions is always busy.
Because there are so many departments within the sheriff's office, define a busy day. What does a busy day look like for someone here?
I think, well, it depends on the different, the divisions, but I can honestly say that we never have a day where there's just downtime, where there's nothing to do. I mean, no matter what you do in this department, where you are in the chain of organizational hierarchy here, there's just always lots of work to do. And I think, some of that has to do with the fact that, we're short-staffed in certain areas, so we're doing more with less today. But really the level and quantity of work in each division is more than it was when I first came on the job 27 years ago. There's just a lot more going on in our community. We're doing a lot more. So each and every day is, can be challenging, can be busy, but that's one of the reasons I love doing the work that I do. Is every day is different and challenging, and I like to be busy, and I believe that the majority of our staff does too.
Where is the greatest need for staff?
Right now it's in our custody division within our jail. We're actually down 10 positions out of 96 budgeted positions in our jail. So that has an impact. It means a lot of overtime for the staff that we do have. And if we were up to full staff at 96, that's the minimum staffing level that we've had since the early 2000s. So with some things that, different initiatives that we've added within the jail, we probably could use a few more positions beyond the 96, but we're actually down 10. So that's created some challenges. One of the biggest challenges has been filling day-to-day shifts. We do that with overtime. We've had to cut back on some community initiatives, like getting our work crews out on the road. So that was taking the incarcerated individuals from the jail, taking them out into the community, picking up roadside garbage, or maybe doing projects for municipalities like painting or cleanup. We used to have a pretty busy program where we would get the incarcerated individuals out doing that daily. We've had to cut back, and we can't seem to get them out anymore because we just don't have the staff to go out and supervise that program. So until we get our staffing levels back up, that's just one of the initiatives that we haven't been able to fill and put out back out into the public.
Those 10 positions, I take it they haven't been eliminated. So what happened?
So it's basically a recruiting challenge right now. We've had difficulty recruiting enough qualified staff to keep up with retirements, people leaving for other career paths, injuries if somebody has had to leave due to an injury or some type of a problem. So it's really a recruiting issue. We do have funding budgeted for those positions, and we are constantly recruiting and hiring. We just haven't been able to keep up with the number of people leaving the profession fast enough to keep our numbers up where they need to be. So I'm hopeful with some of the recruiting initiatives that we're doing that will change at some point soon. But the last couple of years have been somewhat challenging, and it's not just our profession. It's really every profession out there. Everybody's struggling to meet the demands of having enough help and resources, and we're not immune to that. We're seeing that too.
But there's no denying that being a law enforcement officer is among the toughest jobs in the world. Why is there an issue finding people?
I think right now it's a combination of things. I think over the last few years, unfortunately, I think society has, made our career path at times look less appealing than it was at one time. But, I'll be the first to tell you, I've been doing this for 27 years. I've served with the Sheriff's Office here in Cayuga County for that long, and it's been an awesome career. And, I think anybody that comes our direction, whether you're working in our Road Patrol Division or Custody Division, whether you're seeking out a career path with another law enforcement agency, out there, it's just such a positive, rewarding career. You're doing something different every day. You really are helping people. But unfortunately, I think there's a lot of noise out there today. There's a lot of noise sometimes on social media, sometimes on the news with a negative interaction that police have had with somebody out there in our communities. I think that gets a lot of attention, and unfortunately, it's highlighted some of the negative that can be part of the job, but I think there's much more positive than negative that unfortunately we just don't see enough of. And we try to counter that with a lot of the community outreach that we do, things that we put on our own social media pages. We're out in the community all the time with positive interactions with the public. And we try to highlight that because unfortunately I don't think there's enough of that being shared by the media out there today. But that's part of it. I think overall there's a reduction in the number of people that are seeking work out there in the career field in every discipline. So, that weighs into it too, but there's a number of factors, but I think, we're going to have to continue to recruit harder. We're going to have to continue to highlight the positives of the work we do and, just keep trying to fill these positions through some new creative initiatives. But for anybody watching, it's an awesome career. I invite you to come check it out, come visit us, come tour. It's just an awesome career path.
When you do come across someone, you go to a job fair, for example, and you meet someone who expresses interest in joining the sheriff's office. This is a two-part question. Part A is, how do you pitch working for the sheriff's office to them? And B, how do you do so while also giving a realistic view of what that day-to-day life is like?
Sure. So I try to highlight all of the great things that we get to do. And one of the unique things about our sheriff's office is the fact that we have multiple divisions. We have a navigation division. So, not only for somebody coming to maybe work for our road patrol division, do they get to go out in a marked patrol car and enforce laws and do police work. They can also work part-time within our navigation division, go out on the lake, patrol our lakes and waterways as part of our navigation division.
Good time of the year for that.
It is. We're starting to hire and get ready for that with some part-time staff that we employ, but our full-time people also get to do that. We have snowmobiles, we have four-wheelers. We get to do some fun things out there and patrolling our trailways. If we ever get snow, we put our snowmobiles out there, but last few years we haven't had them out very much.
It's been a quiet few winters.
It has, but when we do get snow, we do get those out there. But there's a lot of neat opportunities, and I try to pitch the fact that we really do have a good. I feel like it's a family feeling here. I treat this office, individuals that work here, as like they're part of my family. I think, we have a really good bunch of staff members here that work well together, that get along. I think we have a great atmosphere here. I invite people that are interested to come, do a ride along or come tour our jail. Or even, if we find somebody that's really serious about this path, say in our custody division, we'll let them come and maybe shadow for part of a shift and just to see firsthand what it's all about. So we try to pitch all the positive things we get to do, but I'm realistic. Every job has its pros and cons, and
Sure.
There are bad days, and we do have bad days, but for me the good days way outweigh the bad days that we have.
Your entire career, Sheriff, has been with the Cayuga County Sheriff's Office. You've had your share of bad days and having to deliver bad news and deal with people at their worst. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with it?
It's very difficult, and we were talking before we started the interview today about delivering, really terrible news. When somebody loses their life, I've had to go out and let family members know that they've lost a loved one tragically, and that is difficult, and that weighs on an individual. And I'm human, just like everybody else. That's difficult to deliver that bad news, and sometimes you do have a very bad day, and you go home wondering, did I really make a difference today? And you've got to have a strong family network. You've got to have peer support within the agency. You do need to talk about those things and get those things off your chest. But if you have a bad day, you do need to make sure you have an outlet outside of here to get rid of that stress. And that includes being able to talk to somebody, family, friends, maybe, whoever that might be, to get some of those things off your chest. But there's very difficult days, and we have to work hard to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our staff when they have those very difficult days, that we're providing the services and things they need, the support they need to be able to work through those things.
You've been married a long time. You've helped raise a family. You're a grandfather now. I don't know if that's breaking news, but it's true. You are a grandfather. How do you keep work at work? How do you keep those bad days here and not take them home with you?
It's very difficult, and that's a really, really good question, and that's one of my biggest challenges, especially being sheriff. My phone never shuts off.
Right. You don't have a 9-to-5 job anymore.
I don't. When I go home, I work still, we're a 24/7 operation, and, it kind of stops at the top with me, and my day never ends. And thankfully, my family's been very understanding. My wife's been very understanding, and God bless her, she's been awesome. I tend to attend a lot of events. I get to a lot of community functions, and she's always right there with me. And if I didn't have her with me, I'm not so sure that I would want to do this job, but she has just been great to support the work that I do. And, you mentioned my grandson. That's one of my stress reliefs now. I love getting out there, and he's 2 years old, and just, when I'm with him and playing with him and doing things outside, the world, is a much better place. I don't have to think about work, and I get to de-stress, and it's awesome.
Do you worry about the kind of world he's going to inherit?
I always think about that. I fear the direction, that we're heading, and, I get very concerned with, how partisan everything is today, and the divide, and, how far right or how far left, things have gotten. It does concern me a lot. I think everybody needs to find a way to kind of get back to the middle and work together. We all see things through a different lens. And if we can't get back, somewhere closer to the middle and work together, that I do fear what we're leaving, our children, what I'm leaving my grandchildren, and the direction that we're heading. And, public safety is a prime example today. It's turned so political today when you look at some of the criminal justice reforms that, I'll be the first to admit some of these reforms, we did need to tweak some of these things. But, in many cases we went too far, and we need to kind of bring them back a little bit. But we're never going to do that if we don't work together on, both sides of the aisle, and including law enforcement in the discussions when it comes to some of these things. So I am very concerned, because I think if we don't fix some of these things and bring them back to where they need to be, that crime in general, it's going to continue to be an issue.
In your opinion, Sheriff, what are some of the reforms that were necessary, and what are some of the reforms that you felt went a little too far?
So when it comes to bail reform, I don't think that it was improved. I'm not so sure that we can really say that it was reform, but I do feel very strongly that somebody shouldn't be held just on the basis of whether or not they can afford to bail themselves out. But I think that we do have many statutes and laws and situations where a judge has the inability today to hold somebody when really they do need to be held for the public safety interests of our community. So I support very strongly a dangerousness standard, and giving judges the ability, the discretion to determine, should this individual be held? Is it in the best interest of society to hold them? Should they be cut loose? So, I think there were tweaks that could have been done with the bail system, and I just think we went a little too far when we basically said it's either, yes or no for certain statutes. Some statutes may seem somewhat minor, but, there might be a situation where this individual is a threat to public safety, or they're clearly a flight risk and they should be held or detained due to that. And we just went too far, and we've taken away so much discretion from the judges that that has had a negative impact.
We are a couple of years into bail reform as we know it. There's an ongoing conversation in Albany about tweaking it or overhauling it or getting rid of it. We won't get into the politics of it, but how has bail reform as it stands now, how has it changed, or has it changed the approach to the job at this department?
So for us, one of the first things that I can think of is, there are times when we've arrested somebody. I can think of a recent circumstance where somebody in our community put their hands around somebody's neck. They obstructed their breathing. That was not an offense that bail could be put on that individual, and that person was clearly a threat to our community and should have been held at the point of arrest when that particular charge was charged. I think anybody, whether it's a domestic relationship or a stranger or whatever the case might be, if somebody's putting their hands on somebody's neck and obstructing somebody's breathing, that I think they pose a potential risk or danger to not only that person they did it to, but people in our community. I think they should be held pending adjudication of that charge. So that's one circumstance. But one thing that's very difficult today is that we see a lot of bench warrants being issued for individuals who can't be held on bail that probably should have been. They're released. They don't show up to court. This can happen multiple times. Bench warrants are issued. So we've had to execute additional bench warrants, go out and find individuals more than one time on the same charge to bring them back to court, to see them released. So it's impacted our ability to do other proactive things when we're chasing down individuals that are not showing up to court, that really should be locked up. And I look at it too from the perspective of the individual that's being arrested. In many cases, this is not good for them. If they're out using drugs or they're out committing additional crimes, that's not good for the individual. I'd rather see them here, locked up in our facility, getting the care and treatment they might need to deal with addiction issues, or keep them from recidivating and doing the same type of thing over and over. It's not good for them to be out in the community continuing to offend. So I think we need to tweak it, whether it's that dangerousness standard or address the fact if somebody's out there and maybe they're committing petty crimes, but they're doing it over and over. Let's look at how many times they can do that before they can be held, and we can address their issues for not only, the public safety, but for their safety.
We know how much the world has changed just in the last 5 years. It's changed even more since your first day in uniform. Is it a worse world now than it was all those years ago? Is it a better world? Is it a combination of the two?
I think it's a combination of the two, and I think it's really from your perspective, right? So I see a lot of things today that are really much more positive. And when it comes to the work that I do, I can tell you today, unlike when I first came into law enforcement back 27 years ago, we're working much closer with our partner agencies, with our human services providers, with our mental health providers. We're not working in silos anymore. We're really doing a much better job of working in coalitions when it comes to mental health situations, when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to drug prevention. I love that we work so closely with other organizations and partners in our community to address these issues. So, I think we're doing a much better job there, so that's positive. I think, unfortunately, a negative, when I first came on, we didn't deal with nearly as much crime here in Cayuga County as we do now. I remember sometimes going out onto a road patrol shift, and there might be a day here and there where I'd work a whole 8-hour shift and not get sent to a call. That never happens anymore. Our folks are out there, and many times they're bouncing from one call to another. So I think, in that way it's negative. But really it's all in perspective and how you look at things, and I think you can find some positives, but there's certainly some negatives there too.
I have to ask, back in the day when you would have a shift where nothing has happened, no calls, how do you spend your time back then?
Being proactive. I mean, doing some traffic enforcement, going out there trying to execute warrants or serve civil process, which is something we're tasked with doing here at the Sheriff's Office. We serve a lot of civil process for our civil division, and that generally is, evictions or wage garnishments and that type of thing. But yeah, we would go out and be more proactive, and I loved getting out of the car and being out into the community and seeing people and engaging people. We can't do that as much from a road patrol perspective as we used to, just because of how busy we are. But you could always find plenty to do in an 8-hour shift, even if you weren't getting a call. And it was a lot of the things that I love doing, and our people still today love to do when they have time, is be proactive.
You think back decades ago, the era of the beat cop, the officer that would patrol a neighborhood, just walk up and down the sidewalk. Is that an era that's passed us by? Is there still such a thing as beat cops?
Not like it was back in the day. I mean, I think for us in our rural community, it's a little easier once in a while for our members to get out of the car and be engaged with some of our, local folks in some of our smaller villages and places in our rural community. But it's definitely not like it was, a few decades ago, where there was a lot of time to be out of the car and visiting businesses and visiting the local folks in the community. And again, it's just due to call volume and what we're seeing out there. We've really seen our call volumes go up considerably over the last few decades, and that's really changed our ability to be proactive. But yeah, we just don't see that like we used to back in the day.
How has technology and social media changed the job?
Quite a bit. So good and bad, I think. Technology, we're using technology in many different ways to streamline the way that we do our jobs and to do it more efficiently. I think of drone technology. We're utilizing drone technology today for a number of things. We're using it to, for search and rescue if we need to get up in the air and look for somebody, or for picture taking, crime scene documentation. We're using them for that too. And we're using really sophisticated scanners today to scan our crime scenes and our major vehicle crash scenes to give us a real solid map of what that looks like without having to take hundreds and hundreds of photos to try to put a scene together. We can scan the scene and really put a 3D image of that particular scene together using the technology we have today. So that's been great. And one of the recent initiatives that we deployed using technology was utilizing iPads to offer basically like a telehealth visit between someone who's having a mental health crisis and a experienced mental health therapist or provider at the other end. We're not trained sufficiently to deal with that. We need professionals when it comes to dealing with a mental health crisis situation, but we're using technology, that being iPads, to connect those therapists and providers immediately with somebody that might be out in a rural area that we can't get to a provider in a timely fashion. So technology's really helped us in that aspect. You mentioned social media. I think there's pros and cons to that.
Yes.
It's a great way for us to get information out to the public. It's a great way for us to get feedback back. But sometimes I think, it can be very detrimental if, the information that people are pushing out there isn't accurate, or, unfortunately, it's created a platform for people to, just put things out there that really, in my opinion, aren't appropriate. And so pros and cons with that, but, we do use it a lot to push information out. And as I spoke earlier, the positive community outreach that we're trying to do, we really try to highlight that. That is our media platform that we use to do that. Without that, we couldn't push that information out there.
You brought up mental health. Let's talk about that for a second. There's enough evidence to show that mental health issues have been around since the dawn of man. It's gone through different names over the years, but it's always been there. When did mental health awareness, to your recollection, begin to enter the job of a police officer? Because it wasn't always something that was considered, but now it is. Now there's a big focus on it. When did that shift begin to change?
When I first started, occasionally we would have somebody in crisis that we would have to deal with, and our only option was to really pick them up if they were suicidal or in a major crisis where we were concerned they might hurt themselves or others. All we could do was take them to the hospital, get them an evaluation, hope that they got the help they need. But I can say that, it really wasn't an area where we received enough training to understand what people were going through when they were having a mental health crisis, or how we could potentially de-escalate or help somebody. I think, over the last 10 years, it's really come to light that, mental health, especially today following what I think the COVID epidemic impacted, I think we're really starting to see just how prevalent it is out there, how there is a need for specially trained people to address mental health situations, how it's impacting individuals that wind up in our jail facility because, there aren't appropriate locations, enough beds for people who need help to get the help that they need. And unfortunately, they wind up in our jail facility when maybe there are times this isn't the appropriate place for them. But I think over the last decade, it's really started to really come to the forefront of how serious this problem is, how we need to do more to address it. I talked about the COVID pandemic. I think, a lot of our younger folks were home, school wasn't in session, and I think it was very detrimental for a lot of younger kids to be home without that structure at school, to have that interaction with other kids in school. And I can see from what's going on in our school districts now that it really had a negative impact on the mental health of a lot of individuals. So I think in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to continue to see this problem grow. And I think municipalities are going to have to put more funding towards addressing this issue. Our law enforcement agencies are going to have to work harder to meet the needs of individuals using the technology that I spoke about, linking people with crisis services. From our jail facility front, that's been very challenging meeting the need. We've had some very difficult individuals that are in need of mental health help that have received services here with Cayuga County Mental Health that are embedded in our jail, but meeting the growing need is becoming more and more challenging. So it's something that we've recognized that we need to put more resources towards. And, I think everybody at every level of government, local, state, and beyond is recognizing that this is a crisis that's growing and we need to make sure that we address it.
Almost sounds like the job of police officer has evolved to such a point that some days they are a caretaker, some days they are a guidance counselor, some days a therapist. That's a lot of pressure to put on an already high pressure job. How do the deputies, the people that go out every day, that are interacting with all sorts of people, how do they handle it?
So it can be very difficult, but I can say that with the right training, with the right resources and community partners helping them along the way, they're able to work through that and do that. But I would agree, today we're doing more, social services work than we ever did in the law enforcement arena. We're not just making arrests and, moving on to the next call. It is about, getting people help and, doing the right thing and doing human services work to the degree we never had to before. But, we have some community partners out there that are really, really beneficial, that help us do some of the work that we do. We have, when it comes to mental health, we have mobile crisis services that comes out and meets us on scenes, or will meet us, on an iPad if we need to. We have peer support today from agencies like Nick's Ride for Friends, peers that address addiction, who've been down that path before, who found a path to recovery. They come out and they can help us address, if someone in crisis that we're dealing with due to addiction issues, they can come out and help us support that person and get them the help that they need. And so we have a lot of resources, a lot of different things that we can do, but it is very challenging. It requires a lot more training today than it ever did. It requires a lot more community resources than it ever did, and it requires more funding, and that can be challenging. But we do everything we can to get the funding that we need to meet those critical needs.
Well, Sheriff, so much more to talk about that we'll have to wait until the next time we get to sit down together, but always appreciate your time and your candor.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great to see you again.
Good to see you. That's Sheriff Brian Schenck of Cayuga County. This has been The Casual Conversation, and I have been Joe Salzone.